Hey there, baking enthusiasts and history buffs. Welcome back to the channel. Today, I've got something truly special to share with you all. I recently stumbled upon this incredible piece of culinary history, and I honestly can't wait to dive into it with you. Take a look at this. This is the Pillsbury Cookbook, published all the way back in 1914. We are talking over 300 vintage recipes, beautiful old school illustrations, and even some full menus. Just opening it, you can feel the history. I even found a recipe for their original Crescent rolls. So come on, let's take a look inside. Now, before we thumb through these amazing pages, let's talk a little about the company that brought us this treasure, Pillsbury. Most of us probably associate Pillsbury with those iconic refrigerated biscuits, Crescent rolls, and cookie dough, right? But their story goes way, way back. It all started in 1869 when Charles A. Pillsbury, along with his uncle and brother, founded C. A. Pillsbury and Company in Minneapolis, Minnesota. They started with a single flour mill on the Mississippi. Imagine that, just flour. At the time, flour milling was a huge industry, and they quickly became known for producing high-quality flour. In fact, they built what was at one point the largest flour mill in the world. They were innovators, constantly improving their milling process to create the best possible product. So how did a flour company go from grinding wheat to giving us these convenient pop-open cans of dough? Well, it was a gradual evolution. Fast forward several decades through changes in ownership and major shifts in how people baked at home. During the mid-20th century, as lifestyles became busier, there was a growing demand for convenience food. Pillsbury, always looking ahead, recognized this. They started experimenting with pre-mixed flours, and eventually, in the 1950s, they introduced their refrigerated dough products. This was a game changer. Suddenly, homemade biscuits and rolls were just minutes away. I used to love to cook with my grandmother, and I was always in charge of hitting those dough cans on the counter so they would pop open. I loved it. It was this amazing thing to a child. And fast forward in my life, decades, I still use their products. And that brings us back to this incredible cookbook. Published in 1914, these recipes predate those refrigerated products by decades. And guess what I found inside? Recipes for biscuits and various types of rolls. Could these be the original blueprints? The very first iteration of what would eventually become the beloved Pillsbury biscuits and Crescent rolls we know today? It's entirely possible. Companies often adapt their original recipes as technology and consumer needs change. These could be the grandmothers of those biscuits we all call Pillsbury Grands and the original Crescent rolls. Think about it. Flour, leavings, fat are all here. The techniques would have been a bit more involved, requiring more hands-on work than just popping open a can, but the essence of the flavor profile might have been born right here in these very pages. So I love this little tidbit that they have in the cookbook about bread making. It shows that way back in 1915, they knew that what we call wheat bread today was more nutritious than a white flour was. So let's go ahead and read this. Good bread is the great need in poor homes and oftentimes the best appreciated luxury in the homes of the very rich. Compared with wheat flour, all other bread materials are insignificant. Of all the important foods, wheat bread contains the most nutrition. Bread made from Pillsbury best flour is richer in good nourishment than any other food article that the world has produced. Keep in mind, all the recipes we go through today can be found on our website, moderndayfoodie.com. And we'll also put a link to each recipe in the description of this video. So let's take a look at one of these biscuit recipes. First, we'll start with the baking powder biscuits. So it calls for 2 cups of Pillsbury's best flour, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 1 teaspoon salt, 1 cup milk and water, half of each, 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon of lard. So, lard. You don't see that in recipes these days too often. But why use lard in biscuits instead of butter? Well, lard is used in biscuits for its superior ability to create a flaky and tender texture, while butter is often used for its rich flavor. Now, when I eat Pillsbury biscuits, I do taste a lot of butter, depending on what kind it is. While butter is often used for its rich flavor, lard is 100% fat, which coats the gluten strands to prevent them from developing, resulting in a more tender biscuit. It also has a higher melting point than butter, creating a more distinct, thin layers that separate easily. So, what I suggest is you try a batch with butter and try a batch with lard and see what you like better. Personally, I was taught to bake with lard because it gave a fluffier texture. Today we usually use shortening in place of lard. Shortening and lard are not the same thing because shortening is a plant-based product while lard is an animal product. Shortening is made from hydrogenated vegetable oil and lard is rendered pork fat. While they can sometimes be used interchangeably in recipes because both are 100% fat, they have different flavor profiles and are used in different ways. As a kid, we used to keep the bacon drippings in a can under the sink to use in baking. So our biscuits used to taste like bacon. They were so good, but boy, so bad for you. Our next recipe is egg biscuits. This calls for 2 cups of Pillsbury's best flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, a half a cup of milk, 1 tablespoon of butter, 1 tablespoon of lard, 1 tablespoon of sugar, and the whites of 2 eggs. Now, this recipe calls for eggs and milk. The eggs provide structure, binding, moisture, richness, and a tender texture. They act as a binder, holding the ingredients together, while the fats and moisture from the eggs contributes to a richer flavor and a more tender crumb. The proteins in the egg also help create the baked biscuit's firm structure and can add leavening, making the final product lighter and fluffier. If you are making these biscuits gluten-free, I would use the egg recipe because of the binding nature of eggs. Gluten-free baked products have issues staying together. But this recipe calls for egg whites. Egg whites are used in biscuits to add protein also for structure and to trap air for a lighter, fluffier texture. The protein in egg whites come together and create a more rigid crumb, while the high water content helps with leaving through steam and gluten development. Compared to the whole egg, which provides richness from the fat in the yolk, egg whites can lead to a less dense, more cakey or airy product. Ugh, I can just taste them now. They sound wonderful. So the next recipe is the Crescents. Now, I'm not sure if this is the exact recipe that Pillsbury uses for their Crescent rolls, but I was kind of surprised there was no butter in this recipe. So a true croissant has a lot of butter, cold butter. I won't go into a croissant recipe, but I see why they call them crescents and not croissants now that I see they don't have any butter in them. So when I think about the flavor of their crescent rolls that come in the tubes, the more I think about it, they're not as fluffy as a regular croissant would be. So the lack of fat is what causes that. But this recipe has 1 quart of warm water, 1 yeast cake, 1 tablespoon of salt, and 2 tablespoons of sugar. I was really surprised to see the sugar, but that probably makes it really good. And then some sifted flour. So I haven't tried this myself, but I'm dying to try this recipe to see how similar they are from today's crescent rolls get in the refrigerated section of pretty much any grocery store. And something else they don't have in the materials section of the recipe is that you also do need butter and eggs, because at the end of the recipe it says place into a buttered pan, bringing the two ends around towards each other into a crescent shape. Let rise until light, brush with egg and water. So what this is telling me is that you need some egg and you do need some butter. So normally I would think that they just mean oil, grease the pan, but I probably would do it in butter because then it will give it that buttery flavor. It is truly amazing to think that the same company that milled flour for these early recipes would eventually revolutionize home baking with their ready-to-bake dough. This cookbook isn't just a collection of recipes, it is a tangible link to a pivotal time in American food history. It shows us where they started, giving us a glimpse into the recipes that might have inspired their future innovations. I hope you enjoyed this little journey into Pillsbury's past with the incredible 1914 cookbook. It's truly fascinating to connect the dots between these vintage recipes and the products we enjoy today. If you have any old cookbooks or food history stories, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more cultural adventures, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching and happy baking! We invite you to watch all our vintage recipe videos, from our Eating Like a President series to browsing vintage cookbooks.